Hey friends, welcome to the Plant Strong podcast. I am your host, Lisa Bennett, and today our very special guest is my cousin, Tara Woolard, who I consider really more like my sister. We grew up together. We'll talk a little bit about that. But Tara is the founder and CEO of DeSoto, which is the Discovery School of the Outdoors in Louisville, Kentucky. And she established this. It is a ropes course, leadership, team building, training center in Louisville, Kentucky. It has been going strong since 2009, and Tara has been at the helm through several iterations of what that has looked like, working with ministry partners and expanding into the community in the marketplace, now having many corporate clients, schools, any kind of environment, team that wants to increase their capability of working together, understanding one another, building trust, all of these things on a beautiful campus in Louisville where they have this incredible course. And Tara and her team of facilitators have just developed an impressive program there. And so it's really cool to talk to her because I know her as one of my besties and person I've never known my life to be without. But it is really delightful to talk to her on the foundation of her as a business, a small business owner, a leader in her community, a learner, a teacher, a facilitator, like I said, a CEO. There are just a lot of components to this conversation that I think will be applicable across the board. We'll dive into that more deeply, but I promise you, you're going to have stuff that you're going to walk away from today that will be helpful, whether or not you will ever be or ever have been a small business owner. I think there are lessons that can be gleaned for all of us, and I'm eager for you to get to know my sis, Tara. All right, here we go. Well, good morning, Tara. Welcome to the Plant Strong podcast.
Good morning.
Oh, girl, we've been planning for this for a while, and I did a little intro of you, but I'm going to really try to restrain myself as it is like I'm interviewing my sister, and I am so excited. Guys, we grew up. When I say we grew up around the corner from each other, we literally have a corner of two streets that meet. That is where, for our entire lives, we were both born there. Our parents, when we were young, our parents would go to the corner to watch to make sure the other kid made it to their home, whichever one we were coming from. And then as we got older and had a little more freedom, we would stand and watch each other and do a little wave and then run into our house. So literally, when I say around the corner, I mean around the corner. So I'm so excited to have you here today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here, and I echo everything that you just said. Just feels like I'm having a conversation with my sister.
That's right. Yeah, we are so blessed. I know that gets overused, but that is a true statement in this exact situation. So, like I said, Tara and I were born in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, and grew up, and our parents are still each respectively in the same house. So literally that is all we've ever known. And our dads are first cousins, and just all the cool things that are involved there. And we're so grateful. But today is not, as much as I could talk and revel in the joy of that, today's not about our relationship. Today is about some really good stuff that I believe, Tara, you have for our community. So I just kind of want to get us started. We always jump right in. I'd love for you to tell us kind of a 30,000 foot view of, and this is always really hard for people who've been in ministry their whole lives, but just kind of a little snapshot of like a thread of ministry spaces, what that's looked like, or marketplace, either one through the years. And then in addition to that, we would love to hear just a little bit about what makes you Tara. Like, what brings you joy? What are some things that inspire you? So if you can give those couple nuggets to get us started with, then we'll jump into the questions.
Okay, sounds good. I can do that. And yes, this might be difficult for both of us because we both love to talk.
Yes, yes.
Keeping this to the time frame is going to be a challenge,
All
but
right.
challenge accepted.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of already said it, Lisa. We both grew up in families that were in full-time ministry, in the church, at the Christian, Bible college, Christian university. So always around ministry, just kind of born into ministry. So watching our parents serve other people and serve God and work in his church was just, I didn't know anything else. It was, and I'm thankful for that. But we also saw some of the bad with the good. And so, although we saw all the ways that God blessed our families through that, and the way that I think both sets of our parents modeled that for us, we also saw the toll that it could take being in full-time ministry and how challenging that was, and starting new churches or going into churches that were small and maybe didn't quite have the vision that our parents had for how to reach out in the community and things like that. So just kind of growing up, that's what was modeled and that's what we saw. And then I wasn't sure I wanted to go to a Bible college. Not that I had anything against it, but I wanted to play athletically, collegiately at the next level. And I had some offers to do that at non-Bible college places, but I also had offers at Bible colleges. So I did inevitably end up in a Christian university setting, which was great. I don't wish that it had gone any other way, and was able to be again in a Christian setting where I had amazing professors and coaches and friends and people that just poured into me during that time of my life, preparing me not necessarily for like a church ministry, but just preparing me and growing me as a Christian, as a believer, whether I was going to be in the secular world doing that as a believer or whether I was going to be more tied to a specific ministry. So that would have been, through my college years. And then I did not expect this. Definitely. I mean, I didn't take one missions class at all, which just proves that you don't have to take a missions
All right.
work. And went on my first ever missions trip 2 months before I was supposed to graduate in college. And next thing you know, I'm serving full time with Team Expansion on the mission field in Venezuela. So that was just a huge kind of leap of faith for me, something that I did not plan or foresee during that time. But again, when I look back at the trajectory, I can see how God prepared each of those steps. And I was supposed to be there at that time that I was there. So that was 8 years that I ended up serving cross-culturally, church planning. But church planning looks a lot different in a third world country
Sure. Yeah.
than it does here. And so that was eight years there, and then returned to the U.S., still was involved with Team Expansion. And that's kind of where this whole idea of where I currently am came to fruition when the president of Team Expansion pitched the idea to me about starting this ground zero Discovery School of the Outdoors, team development, experiential training, and how could we utilize that for Team Expansion's purposes, but also in the professional world here in Louisville, Kentucky. So that's just, I guess that's the best way to capture the snapshot.
Yeah.
All the years. Yeah.
Perfect. Perfect. So what are some things that you love and like personal? What's just something that gets you excited, you love to do?
Carolina basketball.
Yes, sir.
Our heels, and we love it. Now, I think I'm a little more obsessive about it than you are. The things that I have, all the statistics and things, it's just useless information, but it's all there. It's in my brain.
Yes, sir.
Diehard Carolina fan. Love sports, love basketball, especially because that's what I played. God taught me a lot through just that particular sport. But I also love to be outside. I love to hike. I don't mind being in the mountains. I just want to be in nature. The beach is my ultimate, like when I read The Sacred Romance. Did you read that book?
Yeah. Yeah.
I read The Sacred Romance eons ago.
Yeah.
I was reading it and I was like, oh, God romanced me at the beach.
Oh,
That's
that's
what it
so
was. It's the
cool.
beach. Because when I go to any beach,
Yeah.
particularly the Outer Banks, which is home to
Mm-hmm.
us,
Mm-hmm.
that is where I feel most connected to him. And
That's so cool. I
so,
love it. Oh, I love it. That's so great. All right. So, as a podcast, we exist to help women in ministry feel seen. Like that's our kind of our primary goal around here, to feel seen, understood, and not alone. And to be clear, we believe all women who follow Jesus are technically in ministry. So we don't like boxing it into a real narrow focus. The ministry of pointing people to Jesus, we're all called to do that. So the beauty of that fact results in passionate Jesus followers in every imaginable role, title for their job or space of influence. And we have an intentional focus here of women in church planning and church multiplication. So, that can be all along the spectrum of involvement and what that looks like. But that's why I think our conversation today is going to be so helpful and such a great resource for our community. One of the things I've loved about watching your life through the years is your ability to stay agile. And you referenced a bit of that, just giving your little snapshot of your life to this point. And it really, from my perspective, it really has seemed to be all about staying close to Jesus. And from that posture, following him wherever he has led you. But really, you got to get further upstream to the staying close to Jesus part. I would love to pause here for a minute and kind of address the how. How has he led you? What does that look like? And what have been some practices through the years that have helped you abide in Jesus? We talk about that a lot around here, but I just think we can't ever exhaust that topic because in my experience, ministry can really make you get lazy with that. Like you're working for Jesus, you're working for the church. And so your personal pursuit of your relationship with Jesus can really kind of be phoned in sometimes, and it never ends well when that is the case. And so I would just love to hear something about your practices, and has that been consistent? Like, have you found these are the practices that have worked for me and it's really stayed pretty consistent, or in different seasons have you found that you've kind of mixed it up? I'd love to hear some about that.
yeah. I definitely think it's different in different seasons because
Mm,
obviously when I was on the mission field, there were times that I felt burnout
mm,
because you're church planting and you're
mm,
church planting in a third world country. So you're dealing with the extra on top of like, how in the world do we even do this with all just the hard life sometimes that you're hard life situations that you're dealing with. So there were times where, you're just like, well, I'm in ministry. But what am I doing for myself? And when I
yeah.
felt those times come, it was most like what you referred to. It's just because I had stopped doing the personal side of things that I needed to do. So I think it does shift depending on what you're doing and the season of life you're in and what your ministry looks like, whether it is
Mm-hmm.
like in a church or a church plant, or whether it's in secular business world where, you're trying to be that light in the darkness or in a place where people don't share that same faith as you. Um, there's been seasons where I journal more than others,
Mm-hmm.
and that's helpful for me. I'm a music lover, so I'll find some of my favorite, worship songs or groups, that I like to listen to, and sometimes just putting that in and walking and sort of praying and meditating and reflecting as I'm doing that. Like I said, I'm a nature person.
Yeah.
So I love to experience that and where all of my senses are engaged. So
Yeah.
it's good for me to get out and be active and move while I'm doing that. Sometimes I've listened to your podcast while I'm walking around at the park
Mm-hmm.
or other podcasts. That's been a big thing lately is podcasts. Books that are written by authors that I know will challenge me in my faith. Obviously, just Bible reading plans, things like that I know are different from other things that I've done. You do have, especially when you and I have grown up our whole lives, there's literally not a sermon we haven't heard. It can get really after you're like,
Sure.
I could have preached that myself. Like, I
Yeah.
love that. Tell me something
Right.
new. So you
Right.
do have to find creative
Yeah.
ways. I think
Yeah.
for me, I've had to be intentional about finding creative ways to abide and
Yeah.
to be
Hmm.
connected in that. So it does change.
Yeah.
One thing that I did a couple years ago, this was honestly the best thing that I've ever done, is there was a lady that went to my gym,
Hmm.
my CrossFit gym, and I knew how bold her faith was. And she's older than me. And I was like, I need this lady, like in my life,
Mm,
like not just as my friend at the gym. I'm going to ask her to be like a spiritual
nice.
mentor to me. She and I, that was what, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, we meet every month for
Oh,
coffee.
love that.
And it's like 3 hours long. And we just unpack and we talk about personal things and we talk about our faith and we challenge one another. And she prays for me. And now she's one of my facilitators, which is even
So cool.
she found out about what I'm doing in the business world and she's like, that's awesome. And
Oh
so
my goodness.
that's probably things like that have been really good to be intentional too about finding like it's one thing to mentor others, which I also try to do, but
Hmm.
I need somebody to be pouring
Yes.
into me. And I want
Yes.
someone older, not
Hmm.
just peers, because peers, that's good, but
Sure.
there's somebody that's lived life a little bit more.
Yes.
That's so she's been a blessing to me.
I
Um,
love that. I really love that you shared that. And I want to encourage our listeners to not just blow past that, because I think that's another thing when we're so driven in, I mean, we've got family. There's that meme of like, I'm over here trying to drink my water, exercise, get my meal planning, watch the kids, make sure I'm getting enough sleep. Like it's this list, and it's so relatable. We all know what that feels like. But um, there is just something that God has really been teaching me in the past couple years about that further down the path, whether it could be, and for those of us in ministry spaces, it's probably going to also include older, because we may be further down the path because of our life experience, and that's something we're so grateful for. But there's just something about somebody that's 20 years older than me going, just trust me on this. It's not going to be that big of a deal. In 6 months, you're going to, and whereas when we're caught up in the moment, it feels so much bigger. So I really appreciate you saying that, because I think our listeners are, maybe a lot of us are not doing that because nobody's walking up to us often, especially in church planting, especially for church planting in an area and being intentional about reaching people far from God. We're not being mentored by our peers at church because they've just found out about Jesus. And so it takes that extra level of intentionality and time and effort on the front end to get it figured out. But I promise you, it's so worth it. And yeah, I really appreciate that. That's good.
And it is a balance because I
Yeah.
feel like you need people like that. You need people that are in your peer group and
Hmm.
you need
Hmm.
people younger
Yeah,
that you can
totally.
share that wisdom with. So
Totally. Totally. All right. Well, so you've mentioned several times, you've mentioned your, basketball team, that being a part, and athletics being a part. There's just, throughout your life, there have been some pretty clear threads of connection. Well, everything's clear in hindsight. So I'm not taking away from the discernment of the moment, how it felt, but it's seeming like we can see what God was doing. So I would love for you to even verbalize some of that for us, because I think that's helpful, especially for younger listeners, maybe, but you could be older and just doing a shift in career or ministry spaces. Of how have you looked back and seen God connected, and maybe that will help others to go, oh, I didn't know that thing could count, but maybe it can.
yeah, yeah. I definitely think that playing sports taught me just a lot about life. How to treat people, how to work with people that are very different from you, which I'm doing a lot now.
Right, right.
How to understand differences in personalities and respect that, but how to help people communicate, how to respect those things in one
Mhm.
another. So when I look at some of those lessons from, playing sports as a younger person, but also at the collegiate level, the lessons that our coach instilled in us, all of those are, a lot of it's just people skills. So some of the things that I was learning as a collegiate player, and I love my college coach, like Ron Arnett was been the greatest gift to me, and God knew I needed him in my life at that space. And so he really invested in us as players and taught us, even how we speak to someone older than us. So I was learning a lot of these lessons. And again, you and I learned that from our parents as well. But to have other people outside of our families teach us those lessons of, how to, why it's important to dress a certain way in certain situations and why you do these things and how that gives you credibility, how that gives you authority, how that will help you in life and your advancement and leadership and growth and all of those areas. All of those things played into that. Learning how to deal with things that don't go your way, because you're not going to always win, or you're going to have, hard times that you have to go through. And so all of those pieces, definitely, there's just a lot that I learned from being, a college athlete or just an athlete in general. But also when I think about the church planning aspect, again, that was not something that I thought I had any giftings in. But I guess I did. Obviously, it worked out pretty well. And a lot of the things that I learned having to start from scratch or figure out how to do something with limited resources or how to better mentor and coach people that I'm going to be passing off responsibilities to. All of that has now helped me currently as a small business owner running this small business that partners with Team Expansion that's actually in the business community, in the professional community here in Louisville. And, I have people saying, like my business coach saying things like, you have an entrepreneurial spirit. Like, I can see it in you. You have these giftings. And I'm like, wait, what? I'm like, is that in the Bible?
Right. That's not on the list. What are you doing?
It's prophecy.
Right.
Like, my mind's going through all that. But God took all of those different experiences and he was using those different seasons in my life to grow me in areas that I had no idea. He was preparing for that next phase. And so all of those experiences have played into that. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, totally. I just think it's sometimes really great to hear the specifics listed out, because one of the things we love around here is that we know we have people listening who might be future planters, whether that be that they're still young and figuring out the direction they're going to go, or like I mentioned earlier, a trajectory change, like they're in a career going this direction and God puts a calling on their life for church multiplication. And so I just think I just always want to remind people, and the best way to do that is through the lived example of our guests. Nothing is wasted. And that's not just words. It really means that if you are seeking God and pursuing him, there's really nothing. You cannot mess it up. Like, you cannot. Like, God is too big for that. You're not messing it up. And even things that may go horribly wrong, I'm also not saying that God did that to teach you a lesson or what. Like, we are not, that's not what I'm sitting here saying. But I do know that what we learn, our job is not to find meaning in everything, because sometimes stuff just goes horribly wrong because we're living in a broken world. So to be clear, that's not what I'm saying. But what he can do is redeem parts of that through steps forward that we make, whether it be for other people to connect and have them hear, oh my goodness, okay, so she did this and it didn't derail, and also the just that constant shifting that happens in a life. Like, maybe this is a little different now, but when we grew up, I mean, both of our families have served in the same spaces, mine all the way through my graduation from college, and yours, your dad is still and literally this professor. And so there was a layer of us growing up that just by default, nobody was like teaching me this, but I just kind of thought, well, if you find the right space, then if you're doing the right thing, it probably means you're going to be there for forever. And if you're not, maybe you weren't you weren't doing, the best that you could and or whatever. And I think that definitely is changing. People don't feel that pressure as much anymore, but I don't know. I just think if I was somebody heading out trying to discern God's path in my life, every time I hear someone say there were pivots, there were changes, look at this that God did in a new season, that just serves to really encourage me.
I mean, literally, if we were to chart it out, let's just look at these three. It's hilarious. College athlete who was planning to teach in a classroom and coach somewhere, probably, here in Kentucky, to church planner in Venezuela, 8 years, to small business owner, partnering with the same organization that I went to be a missionary with.
Yeah.
What? Like, it doesn't even make sense. And but what I'm saying is, it does make sense.
Yeah.
God knew that and could see it, and he works that out. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I love you mentioned this when we were talking earlier. You were like, if anything had been skipped, there would have been could God do what he does? Of course. But there would have been a piece of my experience and what I learned and gleaned from that season that would be missing. And so that's another way to look at it too, that like, man, if we can really trust the process and just know we cannot mess it up. Like God is the one who's directing all of it.
Yep, because I would not have been telling you those are the things that I
No, that was not the life plan when you graduated college.
Not at all.
And I say it all the time, but I mean, I live, everything that matters and is important to me in a season is always going to be affected by my girls, like, because I love them and I want them to flourish and I want them to, feel like they are not swimming in the total dark, even though they will be, they have been, and will continue to be at different seasons. But I just think this is real helpful to be reminded of this. And so as we're kind of camping out in that whole trajectory path kind of deal, you've also embodied a space that I've spoken passionately about around here as well, as a single woman in ministry and in spaces where it might have felt challenging. Maybe it didn't, but sometimes the pressure and the awkwardness is coming not from the community, but from the church. And sometimes we've just not done a very good job. And we're doing our little part over here on this platform to have some of those conversations and just, so this is a topic. I've spent an entire podcast with a friend about this specifically. So that's not what I'm asking you to do, but has there been something, what has that in a brief description, has that been a struggle for you? Have you felt supported? Have you done some specific things to just feel more like okay with it? Or has that come naturally that you're like, everybody else got the issue, I don't have an issue with it? Can you kind of just speak just a little bit to that? Just because I always want to be mindful of our listeners who are tuning in, who have a varied story of where they are with their singleness.
Yeah. I'd say overall, it's been pretty natural for me to just, I have a really blessed life. And like you said, I hate using that term because it just sounds so generic, but I don't have a lot to complain about. I mean, just very fortunate. And my perspective on life is pretty optimistic. So it's not something that I've had to wallow around in as much as maybe some of my friends have.
Mhm.
And I think part of that is just maybe my own stubbornness or maybe just my personality
Yeah.
to accept things that part of my life in a different way.
Yeah.
But there have been times where it's been difficult. I'll share a funny story with you that I think the reason it stuck with me is because it stung a little bit, but at the same time, it was very comical. And I was like, well, they ain't lying, but it's also like true. So Eric and Kelly's wedding, and I hope they get to listen to this at some point and hear this story. I don't even know if they know. Walking down the aisle, I'd been in Venezuela, serving already.
Which Eric is her brother,
Yes,
guys.
my
Yeah.
brother
Yeah.
Eric
Mm-hmm.
and my sister-in-law Kelly. It was their wedding. So people hadn't seen me in a couple years because I had been abroad serving. And obviously I came back for the wedding and was in the wedding. So I'm walking down the aisle. And as I'm walking down the aisle, I literally hear somebody over to the left in the crowd, in the pews, somebody said, well, who is that? And the other person really loud said, at least loud enough for me to hear in the aisle, said, oh, that's Eric's older sister, Tara. Yeah, she's not married. And I thought, like, I'm laughing, but I'm kind of like,
Why? Just
does it
why?
matter? Does it matter that I'm not married? It
Wow.
was hysterical. And I think I actually chuckled when I heard it and kind of looked over. I didn't see who it was. It doesn't matter. I know they
Right.
didn't mean anything
Sure.
terrible by it, but it's just funny how sometimes you get lumped into certain
Mm.
things. Oh, that's so and so. Yeah, they're single, or
This is who she is. This is her identity. Yeah.
like it defines me and my identity when I don't really think that it does. So
Yeah.
that was a funny story. And I mean, it happens, and there's been other instances like that, but I
Yeah.
feel like I roll with those punches pretty well
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
love what I do. I love my life. I love the
Yeah.
opportunities God has given me. My singleness has actually allowed me to do things that I would not have been able to do
Yeah.
in another setting, or if I
Hmm.
had children, or if I was married. And so,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I appreciate you being vulnerable about it. Just because, again, I just think the more we talk about it, and because the more we talk about a story like that, which we do laugh at, and we know malicious intent was more than likely not behind it. It wasn't, because if they were at Eric's wedding, there was no malicious intent, because that person would not have been invited if they had malicious intent. But it still didn't need to be said. And I think the better we can get at having those conversations, laughing about it, helping each other recognize, man, maybe there are other things that I say or as a church, and you happen to be, I could speak from personal experience, you are very confident. You are wired in a way that you almost are going to set out to prove somebody wrong about a lack in your life, because
yeah,
it's how you're wired. But others who may be wired a different way, they may carry that very differently. And so I just appreciate you mentioning it. And we can all just keep doing better, doing better. um, okay, so kind of the last space that I'd love for us to camp out in for a bit. So you are a small business owner. That thread that runs through, I mean, it's wild too. Again, I'm having to restrain myself from all the different things that we could talk about, because the fact is, what you do now, which is a small business, and you are the owner of the small business, started as a ministry space that then just God continued to develop and reveal, and you were able to discern. So that's a whole thing that we're not even going to dive into. But what I think is so helpful in a conversation with our community, there is you as a small business owner doing what you're doing. You are someone who is hyper intentional about both building a flourishing business, because it's your paycheck. Like, it is your business. It is your work. It's not something you're doing on the side. It's how you make a living. As well, you're hyper intentional about shining the light of Jesus and pointing people to him. And I believe this will resonate deeply with our church planters, as in many ways they engage with their neighbors, their neighborhoods and communities in more of a, how can we serve you and work alongside of you, whether or not you attend our church or follow Jesus, which can be very similar to small businesses in a community. So our church planners that I'm aware of have less of a concept of we're blowing into the community. We got your answer. Jesus is your answer, which he is, but that rarely goes over well like that. And so it's more of a really, how can we serve you? And if you choose to follow Jesus and learn more about him, that's awesome. But we really are not doing this as a carrot. And it has, like you've got to be transactional in that way. So, this whole thing, that relationship can be presented in a scary kind of walking a fine line kind of way, kind of promoting Jesus, for lack of a better term, but not turning people off. So I believe a better posture is realizing that while at the same time we're not proselytizing, we do want to strive for excellence. And that is, that is exactly what you're doing. You are building a business. Others are building this new church. They want it to be a place of excellence and care, and show that it matters that people have chosen to take part in, whether it be coming to your church or whether it be using the services of this small business. So what has this looked like for you? Just genuinely desiring that the people who cross your path have an experience with a Jesus follower who is engaged and compassionate, and then the Holy Spirit can do the rest. Like, I'm thinking that has been a journey, because you go from full on church planning mode in a third world country, which is different in the context than planning a church in Dallas or in, Seattle. So just talk to us a little bit about kind of all of that and how it swirls around and how it's processed in your day to day.
Yeah. I think, to back up a little bit, it does, when the idea was laid out in front of me from the president at Team Expansion, he's definitely a visionary, and he basically said, we believe this type of service, experiential training, would really benefit our people here as future missionaries and church planners. So could you, basically asking me, could you create that, but could it have a twofold purpose? Could it serve Team Expansion's vision, mission, purpose, but could it also benefit the community? And of course, I was like, yeah, because one of the things that I love the most about being in Venezuela and interacting with people in a brand new church plant was not actually being around people that actually knew Jesus, but being around the people who didn't know Jesus, because it was very comfortable for me to just have natural, genuine conversations. And people were always like, well, you just seem different. What's different about you? Well, this is what's different about me. And it just led into easy, natural, non-conflictive or non-confrontational conversations. And so that made a lot of sense to me, to look at, when we started this, having an opportunity to enrich Team Expansion as an organization and what they're doing abroad, but at the same time use the same services that could be a light to people that don't know Jesus right here in Louisville. And it just, again, kind of happened naturally. I mean, we prayed about how God would bring those people to us. And over the years, he's just been bringing more and more. So when we started getting more requests, then it was a thing of, oh, it's happening. Like, it's really happening. The very vision that Doug laid out, like it's taking place now. Like, we can actually make this a business and it can be profitable. And the profitability from that can continue to bless and serve this organization that we partner with, for us to also offer the same thing for them, but in a completely different context. And so it was very organic, and how it just, every year it just kind of grew. But there was a lot of praying behind people here at this organization, and myself and others who knew it was happening was praying for that growth, that it would get us to that point, so that we could do that. And so I find myself now in a lot of the same conversations that I was when I was church planning in Venezuela. And that is just getting to know people on a personal level, not giving them some 3-step plan. That's just not me. It's not who I am. It's not the way I do it.
Yeah.
and building that relationship so that I can have a deeper conversation. They know I'm different from them. They can see it immediately because they're not seeing me, they're seeing the Spirit who's living inside of me. They're seeing Jesus and they're seeing something different. And every time they come here and we work with a business group, a professional group, they always say at the end of the day, there's just something different about your staff. What is it about your staff that, what is it? Do y'all go to a special training? And I'm like, well, sort of. Yeah, I guess
Yeah.
you could call it that.
Yeah.
It opens that door
Yeah.
where I'm not even having to like beat down a door to tell somebody. They're asking the
Yeah.
questions because they can feel it. And I fully believe that God has blessed the partnership between, this small business and what we do with Team Expansion, that when people arrive on this property and we start that day with them, whatever program that we're running with them, we've already prayed them up. They don't know it.
That's
We're
right.
already
Yeah.
praying for God's Spirit to move, and He starts doing that from the get-go. From the minute they step on this property, they can feel a peace. They literally have said that out loud to us. There's just something peaceful about this place. And I mean, who could ask for a better setup when the deer are running around and the trees are blowing beautifully? People think we've got this stuff on remote
Yeah.
controls. And
God's showing off.
I'm
God's
like,
just
God
showing
is
off.
showing off right now. Like, this is it's such an easy way to share Christ and to share Jesus and to serve our community. So,
Well, and I love that you said it's easy. Like we have made sometimes, or maybe I shouldn't say we, I have made a world often where I think if it feels easier, obviously it's not as sacrificially serving as it should be. And it's just, there's a lot that goes into that. And that's a very broken thought process. But that's what I knew today would be about. It would be about you talking about this path God has led you on through your desires, things you're good at, not stuff that not that you haven't worked hard, to be clear, but you love what you do. And in each season, you have loved what you've done. Some seasons more than others, but there has been a thread of joy and fulfillment and like the sense of, man, I am good at this, and people speaking into you. And that's another thing that I want to, as we're wrapping up today. So there's twofold what I want people, our listeners, to get hopefully encouraged personally. Like maybe you're struggling with a thing, a discernment issue, just something in your day to day as a church planner or as a woman or man who is passionate about church multiplication, and you're just kind of bumping up against something. And Tara's encouragement and example is going to make you feel better about it. But also, what I want us to take away from it is we can be the people who are speaking into others. Tara didn't arrive here today on her own. She had the people talking truth over her all these years, and she stopped and paid attention instead of blowing past it and being like, I already know all of that. Like really pausing and go, could being athletic and loving sports actually serve the kingdom in a specific way? You were willing to explore and be creative about that. And so I would just love it. That would make me so happy to know that people kind of paused on that from listening to us today, to you today, because I think it could change the trajectory of the church moving forward. It really matters, the words we speak over each other and the encouragement we give.
100%.
Girl, I love you. You're my sister. You're my cousin, but you're actually my sister. And we're going to claim that forever. I'm so grateful for you. And I know our community is just going to benefit so much from this time today.
Yeah. Do you have like 1 minute for one quick extra?
Yes, always.
I have to share a story about us, the two of us.
Okay. Uh-oh.
To be surprised that we're in the spaces we're in now, because Mom told me a story when we were younger that the two of us had a full-on church service on our front steps. You might remember. I had my Ronald McDonald doll. You were Ronald's mother. You were sitting there in the audience.
Of course I was.
I was preaching, I guess, if I can say that. So I was,
Yes.
and then I said, and now we'll have a special by Ronald's mother. And you came up, sang a full song. I sat down, then I got back up. We played out an entire church service, just the two of us. And Mom said she stood at the door and just giggled. And I wish video cameras and stuff.
I know. That shows you how old we are.
Yeah, it shows you how old we are. But like, again, not surprised that we're in this space, because from a young age, we liked to talk and be in front of people.
That's amazing. Oh my goodness. Well, look at there. God was planting those seeds way back there. So Ronald, he flourished for a while. I think he's struggling currently. I don't know, but I did my best. Oh, I love you, friend. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for listening to the Plant Strong podcast. Plant Strong is part of the Stadia podcast network. To find more great podcasts and to see how Stadia can help you start thriving, growing, multiplying churches for the next generation, be sure to check out stadia.org/podcasts.